Hello everyone, this is Lori Smith on Spreaker. Glad to be here. Haven't been around for a while. Haven't done a show for a while here. I've done lots of shows on Blog Talk Radio. You can catch my link on my show page there, the main page, or just go to blogtalkradio.com/Lori, Laurie, hyphen Smith, Smith, and I do lots of shows there. Lately I haven't done very many shows because I've had some health problems, just some physical health problems with my teeth and stuff. And really busy with studies as well. I'm just finishing up on an associate degree and working on starting a bachelor's degree, so it's been a busy time for me. I've been working full time, and my sweetheart's terminally ill, so I'm just kind of busy. But I like to do Spreaker shows, and I appreciate everybody who's tuned into my shows. I have quite a few listens. I haven't done that many shows, and I have a lot of people tuned in, a lot of people rallying around to support me and stuff, and I really appreciate it. This show is titled Mission to Promote Child Abuse Awareness, and my mission, this mission started really about 5 years ago, but I didn't do anything vocal about it or public about it for quite a few years. I started 3 years ago talking publicly about child abuse and child abuse prevention and whatnot, and started with a group and got busy and started writing a blog, a public-facing blog 3 years ago. It was called One Child Abuse Survivor. No, that wasn't what it was called, but that's what it turned into, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. But it was actually called Not So Fond Memories Growing Up in an Abusive Home. This blog that I had, and you can see that on Blogger and stuff. I actually wrote a book based on was the blog. I just took the blog word for word and made a book out of it, and because it was just like it was written sort of in story format, just telling my story, my family's story, really, not just mine, and what happened. And this mission just sits really heavy on my heart all the time. I've said in the past, and I wish I was 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 people, that I could do 10 people's work, all at once. There's not enough time. There's not enough people. There's not enough money. There's not enough education. There's not enough promotion. There's not enough anything. And the people that are promoting child abuse awareness and prevention, can only do it for so long. Eventually they either burn out or they give up or they do something else. And then the rest don't care. So then you have to wait for another group of people to come step up to the plate. And it's just horrific. Like, it really is. There's no words for it. I've been talking for 3 years straight about it, but when you come down to it, it's mind-boggling. I'll never understand it myself. Why people do the insane things that they do to their children, or to other people's children, or to any child, for that matter, or why people abuse each other in general. But talking about child abuse here tonight. But yeah, I just wanted to be one more voice. I know when I started out on this mission, that was my mission. It was just to add my voice to everybody else's. It wasn't to try to gain anything for myself. My books, I donate the funds to not-for-profits that are promoting child abuse awareness. I really didn't want the money for those books because that's an insult to me. It truly is. Like, to make money off of my pain and my horror and the very thing that's actually really been a hindrance to my life. And people would say, well, your life is going along pretty good as an adult, and got things going pretty good, but it'll always be there. It'll always be there. The destruction, the complete degradation, really, of the souls in my family, right? The 7 children and 2 parents who decided to do what they did. And it affected all of us, and it'll always be there. It'll never go away. And I can heal, and I have done a whole lot of healing over the last few years. Obviously, I'm doing quite well, but I know because it's just real. It's reality, right? I mean, a lot of people don't choose to live in reality when it comes to looking back at their past or their pain or their sorrow or their grief or whatever it is, because it's painful and it's hard to deal with. And so a lot of people just won't deal with it, and they choose another reality or alternate reality. And for me, I mean, truth is everything. It's like truth is everything. I mean, who am I? You know, who was I? Who am I? Who was I as a child? Who am I now? I'm the same person really that I was as a child, and I went through what I did, and I can't just pretend it didn't happen, and I can't pretend that or change the rules or change the story to make it seem better, as some other people in my family have done that are still living. There's not very many living people left in my family that are still alive, but there's a few, and they've all sort of dealt with it in their own way, the best way that they could. But for them, they just changed it, just changed it from reality into something that just makes them feel better about it, so that they don't have to think about it. Right? It's like, okay, for me that didn't make sense. I was like, okay, why would I want to do that? You know, like that doesn't make sense to me at all. And so I just, you know, for me, the reality of abuse is it's horrific. It's horrifying to know that people are still going to continue on abusing children year after year after year. You know, and it's like, well, how do we change this? How do we do this? For 3 years I've been talking on Blog Talk Radio mainly. And, you know, just talking and talking on other people's shows. I mean, I did like 400 shows for another group, and I've done almost 1,000 of my own shows. And just talking about the human condition, the human heart. Like man's heart. Not just man. We're talking man, woman, you know, child. We're talking, what is the matter with all of us? You know, that we think that it's okay to do these things, and that we do them and then figure, well, it's okay. You know, you see all these headlines pouring out, you know, year after year, headlines, day after day, of children, these poor, innocent little children, and teens, and people underage, little children, being abused and killed. And if they're not killed, they're maimed and tortured, and they live a lifestyle, you know, probably much to what my family lived, my siblings. Some made it, some didn't. And why? Like, why do people do these things? Like, it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. It doesn't make sense. It's not sane, you know. I study psychology as well as a whole lot of the things, and you know, it's not sane to do these things, and yet our culture and the cultures around the world since time began have thought that it's perfectly okay to do these things. It's not sane. It's really not. Child abuse is an insane thing, and it's not funny. You know, it's not remotely cool. And it's completely wrong. And why are people still doing it? Ignorant people. Ignorant people. You know? And I mean, my heart, like, I have a divided heart about, you know, what should happen to people who abuse children. Because part of me, I'm a Christian, right? So part of me says, well, you know, God's going to judge him. And he will. Praise God. You know, and I have to keep my heart right with God, so I can't, you know, I can't have bad thoughts about those people. I have to just know that God's got it covered. He's going to judge. Praise God. Then the other part of me is the abuse survivor who survived abuse from my mother, from my dad, physical abuse, emotional, psychological abuse, some sexual abuse really from my dad. He was a bit of a molester and an ogler. And he was sexually abusive towards my mother, which caused me a lot of issues in my life too. And also some sexual abuse from my brother. And so I'm a survivor of all kinds of different types of abuse, you know, psychological, emotional, physical, sexual abuse. And that part of me, the other part of me, that part wants to see abusers strung up. And the same things that they did, and even worse that they did to their victim, done to them. And no mercy. See, part of me wants vengeance. Part of me wants vindication. I will never get vindication. My only vindication is to know that my abusers are going to face God one day. Well, 2 of them already have. I know they have, because my brother committed suicide many years ago at the age of 33. And he was very sick, twisted individual, but but he was abused too, so his mind was just warped by my dad mainly. Uh, so he's gonna have to meet God. He's had to meet God. Whatever God's judgment is upon him. I mean, whatever. I mean, but that's my peace, is knowing that God's gonna judge. And my mom, she's gone on too, so she's gonna be judged for what she did to me. And that's my peace. Really, it is. Because I'm like, you know what? That is not cool. And you can't think that you can get away with it. Maybe you will get away with it on this earth, and there will be no repercussions, and you will get away with it. And people, these abusers out here get away with it on this earth. But then they're going to go, and one day they're going to die, and they're going to pass on, and they're going to meet our Maker. And I'm telling you, there's a judgment coming. And that brings me some peace. And also because, I know that there is good and evil. And not everybody is good. And not everybody does good things. And even good people do evil things. I mean, evil is there. I consider child abuse to be evil. Because it is. Because I know from my story what I went through. It's evil. It's completely evil to do these things to people. And people know that when they're hurting someone, when anyone thinks about a situation where they've hurt someone in the past, someone that they loved, and they lashed out and they hurt that person, it doesn't even have to be physical. They could have said something or done something that was very wrong, hurtful, painful, caused the other person pain and distress. And you know what's going on in your heart when you do stuff like that. It's evil. It's pure evil. Because it goes against what I believe the real proper way, to conduct ourselves here amongst each other as humans on this planet. It just goes against the proper way, which would be dignity. Because how would we know about dignity? How would we even know? How would we know about goodness and mercy and compassion and light and truth and goodness if it wasn't something that we were supposed to be reaching out for? Because it feels good, because it is good, because we know it's right. And we know what's wrong. So we've been given a conscience. We know what's wrong. And people will do these horrible things, these wrong things, like my dad, for instance, doing these horrible, wrong things to his wife the whole time they were married, and not caring about it at all. Not caring. Not caring what he did to his sons, especially to his sons. He really abused his sons horribly. And especially to maybe our older sister, too, because he ripped her clothes off in the middle of the street and tore her bra off and called her a whore, and he used to just beat on all the kids. And, he didn't think there was anything wrong with that. According to him, he did what he thought he was supposed to be doing. But that's a cop-out. That's what that is. That's a cop-out for somebody to say, oh, well, I just thought I was doing what I was supposed to be doing as a father. It's right. It's like, oh, well, I just thought I was doing the right thing that I was supposed to be doing as a husband, I mean, even after my mother was dead, and my mother was no whore, I tell you that. Even after my mother was dead, years after, like 7 years after, my dad was still bringing up to me on the phone, because I wouldn't have much to do with him, but he'd call once in a while, we'd chat, and he was still getting his digs in. My mother's been in the ground 7 years, and he's still calling her a whore and saying all this stuff about her sleeping around. And I'm like, you know what? You mentioned that to me again one more time, and we will never, ever have another conversation. Ever. I'll be done with you. I don't have to talk to you. You're 2,000 miles away. I will not accept your calls, and we'll be done. Well, now we are done. I cut my family off about 2 years ago now. Completely. All of them. Because I cannot have a relationship with people that will not agree that rape is wrong, that child abuse is wrong, and that any abuse is wrong. Because my abuser family thinks that it's okay. They think it's fine. They will not agree with me that abuse is wrong. So I cannot have anything to do with them. They will not agree that what my dad did to my mother is wrong. And they will not agree that what my dad did to my brothers and to all of us really was wrong. And they will not agree that what my mother did to me was wrong. See, because that would mean that they'd have to face the fact that they were abused too. And they want to live in this fairy tale world where, oh, well, we'll just change the story a little bit and we can feel more comfortable about it, which is what they've done to make themselves feel better, right? It's kind of like my grandmother, my mom's mom. My mom's mom was a crazy, murderous woman who murdered one of her sons, her teenage sons. My uncle literally caused his death. And she was not brought up on charges, and she did no time, and they just buried him out in the backyard. Oh well. My grandmother was an abusive woman. She abused all of her children and her husband. She was a horrible woman. Well, my family, the rest of the remaining people that are still alive, and even some that were, through the years, the conversations that we had, it's always, oh, grandma this, grandma that. I'm like, what, you mean that abusing murderer? Are we talking about grandma, the abuser murderer? Because they had not so much kind things to say about her, but they would always remark about her in a kindly way, as if she was somebody that we should care about or that we should think was okay in what she did. Oh, well, she had a hard life. Right. My grandmother grew up spoiled rotten. She was brought up in a well-off family and had money back in like the 1900, and she was just sick. She was a sick woman. She was probably miserable because she married a farmer. My grandpa, who my mother said was actually her dad, was a good man. But how can he be a good man? He sat there and let this woman badger and torture and actually kill one of her sons and abuse all of the kids. So my family doesn't get the whole idea that abuse is wrong. And they think it's okay that if dad wants to go home and scream and call mother names and hit and punch her and then beat up the boys because they're trying to protect her and then later that night rape her in front of their daughter, which was me, that it's okay. See? They think that's just fine. They think it's fine that my dad used to beat up my mother, beat on my brothers, and slap me around, and also then rape my mother at night. They think that's fine. They will not stand up for what is right. I had to cut them off. I literally said no more. I will have nothing else to do with you. No conversations, no nothing. Because they don't mean anything to me. They have never been there for me. They've never been there for anybody. They're just losers as far as I'm concerned. They're losers because they will not stand up and fight against what is wrong and stand up and fight for what is right. Rape is wrong. And I don't care who anybody is. Rape is wrong, and I don't care. Marital rape is wrong. Rape in any situation is wrong. My mother was very, very sick, physically ill. She had 10 children. She was only supposed to had 5. After the 5th child, the doctors told her, you will die if you have more children. So, but my dad would not let her get on birth control. This was back in like the 50s. And then, so, he kept raping her because she kept telling him no because she didn't want to get pregnant again because she didn't want to die. And he kept saying, well, this is God's will, because my dad was a very sick, psychologically ill, sick man, and raped her multiple times, and then the rest of us were born. So my sister was born, and then I was born. And my mother was very, very sick, so we came in the world very sick. My sister was very sick when she was born, and then I was very sick when I was born. I only weighed like 2 pounds, and came in preemie 3 months early because they had to take me out because she was dying. I was like dying too in the womb there, and we were both dying, and they said, well, we're going to try to save either her or the baby or both, but we're going to try to keep your mother alive here, keep your wife alive, which my dad didn't care, right? Like whatever, he didn't care. And so, after I was born, he continued to rape her. And then the boys, my brothers, my older brothers, would try to actually protect my mother, and they'd get beaten up. And see, my family will not admit this. My family will not get straight on this. They will not get truthful about this. even though we've talked about it in the past and they know that this is the case. My sister actually had the nerve to say to me one time, well, she kind of deserved it. Well, okay, my mother was my abuser and used to slap me around, beat on me, punch me around, throw me into walls, physically abuse me, and bash my head in with a rolling pin and all kinds of other things, and spit in my face and curse at me and throw me out of the house. Well, okay, does that mean that she deserved to be raped by my dad? No. Right is right, wrong is wrong. It was all wrong. See, my sister is warped. That's what abuse does to people. The only way I could keep my sanity was to actually get it straight. Because I could not go on. I couldn't even think about changing it into a lie and saying, oh, well, she just deserves it. Because wrong is wrong and right is right. But not to some people. You see, to some people, it's perfectly okay what they do. Like my dad thought it was perfectly okay what he did to my mom. And to all of us. And my sister backs him up. It's just like, oh my God, this is what happens in abusive families. This is what happens. This is why abuse is allowed to continue on. Because people will not stand up for what is right and will not stand up and speak out against what is wrong. I used to try to protect my mother. Actually, I gave up quite a few years of my life, even though people would say, why would you do that? I've actually had people ask me that question. They would say, why would you do that? Why would you give up your life, part of your life, especially your 20s, to protect a woman who abused you when you were a child, all the way through until you were like 18 years old? As soon as I was threatening to move out, because I was old enough to move out, and I was old enough to, I was a young adult. I was just turning 18. I was actually at 17 was thinking about moving out, and with a friend of mine, because I was not wanted at home anyway. I wasn't welcome really. But as soon as I hit 18, my mom realized, oh my God, this is my last line of defense. If I convince her to stay, then she'll be here to try to protect me from her dad. So my mother manipulated the situation and actually started really for the first time to treat me somewhat decently in my whole life at probably around the age of 18, 19 years old. And sort of, we still had our issues, but as I hit my 20s, she really started to treat me quite well, like a normal, decent person. And we actually had an interesting relationship at that point. But then I found out that she was just using me, because then at the age of 29, after trying to actually really literally keeping my dad away from her at night, which means I couldn't sleep very well because I had to be there so that I could keep him away from her, which was absolutely ridiculous. My mother threw this fit and told me that she never wanted any of us, and that because she had told us when we were children that because my parents were brought up on child abuse charges, they had to go to court. And my mom actually said, and throughout the years had told many people, that she told the judge that it was all my dad and it wasn't her, that she loved her children and she wanted to keep her children. They were all she had. So she would tell us this to make us love her, see. Because she was beating the crap out of all of us and calling us names and stuff. And then she'd be like, I went to the courts and I pleaded for you, to try to, it was a guilt trip, right? And I would just be like, why didn't you just let us go? You know what I mean? My God, like you didn't want us anyway. And so, long story short, at the age of 29, she drops the bomb. I never wanted any of you, and I didn't want children, and I blah, 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 all this stuff. I was like, oh my God. You mean you put us through all this shit just for nothing? That was my response. I was like, you can't tell me that you put all of your children through this shit for nothing. Oh man, the shit hit the fan. And I was gone. I moved 2,000 miles away and I wasn't looking back, man. I was like, goodbye. So I ended up in Canada and I left them all behind. And, it's sad. It's really pathetic what people do to their family members and what people will do to each other, all out of their own evil heart. Their evil intentions, evilness, it runs everywhere. It goes between boyfriends, girlfriends, it runs between family lines, aunts and uncles. It runs between everybody. We are all truly evil at heart. If we can't change, then why do we know about love? Why do we know about compassion? Why do we know about mercy and goodness and kindness and what is good and what is kind and how things should be? Because we know the difference between right and wrong. So do the right thing and stand up for what is right and stand up and speak out against what is wrong. Because this world needs to change, and it won't change until people start making it happen. It will not change until enough people stand up. See, I'm only one person. I only have so much time, you know? Like, I don't know how much time I have. That's up to God. And I'm hoping that my tapes and all these taped products that I put out here, which is about, I don't know, 1,000 at least, will make a difference at some point. You know, I don't get a lot of feedback, and I don't get a whole lot of people sharing my stuff. I get a few, thank God. But I don't get a whole lot of support. Even though I get a lot of people that listen to my shows, I don't get a lot of people saying, you know, we appreciate what you're doing, or, you know, thanks for being a voice out here, or anything like that. And you know why? Because people just really don't care. For the most part. It's real easy not to care. All you have to do is tune it out for a little bit, and you don't have to care, right? All I know is I have to live with it every day. I live with it every day. I live with the knowledge that 2 of my brothers killed themselves because they were so screwed up from the abuse that they suffered, the same home that I lived in, the same home I grew up in, that one of my sisters was suicidal, and she's now dead of cancer, but she was suicidal. She hated her children. She hated life. She hated everybody. She hated herself. And, you know, it's sad. It's really sad. And the other siblings of mine all have their heads stuffed up their ass, but I still love them, you know. But they don't love me. But I don't care. That's all right. I still love them. But, you know, it's sad. It's really sad. It is. I mean, I have to go to bed and wake up every morning with the reality that the reason I don't have children, and the reason that I couldn't have children with my husband, who is now terminally ill and dying, is because I was raped as a child. I was sexually abused for about a year. And you know, the gynecologists were just like, "Oh my God! Like, you can report this if you want, but you're an adult." But you know, when I finally got around to getting a checkup, they were like, "We know you've been abused. You've been sexually abused, and we know, and you can say whatever you want, but we're putting it down on our report as we find it." And I'm like, "Well, whatever," because I couldn't come to grips to even admit that my brother had sexually abused me. It took me a long time to be able to even come to terms with that. And, you know, it left a lifetime of issues for me. A lifetime of issues, you know? Like, you think about all these kids out here right now just fighting for their lives in the hospital because of the abuse that they suffered. And, you know, it's a sad thing. Many will die. They won't even get a chance to live. And then many others will kill themselves. And, you know, do the right thing. Protect children everywhere you go. Make noise about it, and don't ever turn your eyes away from it. Start getting serious about it, because we have to stop this. It's up to us. We have to stop this, right? Thanks everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I'll be back around at some